Hey guys, for today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to create a ground cover using Megascans atlases with a combination of the MoGraph cloner tool and Octane scatter to disperse it across our landscape. We'll be starting out with a plane. This is like how an atlas comes. Once you go to the Megascans library, you'll see a bunch of different versions of this with like this one's a sort of a leafy plant. There'll be some with real dead twigs. You can see how that one is there. Or the perennial plants or like these little red guys. Everything will be sort of laid out like this. So this process can be taken to any of their sort of atlases to generate plants with. What we'll do is we'll cut out each plant and then we'll uh, prep each singular piece to then be cloned with using the MoGraph cloner tool. That will create our little bush. You can see there's a bush down here in the bottom right. This one was created with the cloner tool, and it was probably like 3 or 4 or 5 of these pieces all cloned into a little group, and we'll randomize it, and then we'll use Octane scatter to spread it across our landscape with a combination of the C4D noise to sort of guide it and tell it where to go, and that way we can create like little clusters of the bushes, which helps give it a more natural effect rather than it being sort of equally dispersed across the entire landscape. You can see how we have like this sort of perennial plant bush sort of clustered here, and there's like a nice cluster in the center, and these bushes are sort of clustered over here. The dead plants are have like a nice little cluster up there. And so when you do stuff like that, it sort of gives your landscape a nice variation and gives it like nice little interesting points to look at rather than like having everything sort of equally dispersed across your area. It's sort of, if everything's even, then nothing stands out kind of thing. Whereas right now we're getting nice little like hot spots, so like where your eyes can like wander to. And once you use this with a combination of like the trees and like adding rocks to your scene, you can get a really natural looking landscape. Okay guys, so our first step will be to create our plane and then assign our material to it, and then we'll cut out the atlas pieces. So go up to our object creator menu and create a plane. We can generally keep it at the default size because we can adjust the plants later. So to get our atlas on here so we can have something to cut around, what we can do is create a new material. I'll double click on that, and then in color what we will do is we'll plug in the alpha of the atlas. I find this is the best to cut around because if you're using like the stuff like the albedo, don't really know where you're cutting around, and you can see that everything is sort of hard to judge. I find opacity is the best because it's white and black and you can like really cut around your pieces. So what we can do is just drag and drop this into texture. You don't really have to create a thing in your workspace unless you want to. I like to usually keep things in their respected folders. And then what we can do is assign it to our piece. Turn off reflectiveness so it's not really like doing weird stuff. We just want it to be black and white. You'll see that it's kind of very low resolution. So to fix that, let's go to our editor tab, and then text view preview size, we can change it from default. I usually like to go to 1024, and now you'll see we're getting a nice resolution to be able to cut our pieces out of. So now that we're set up with our atlas, what we can do now is turn our object into editable just by clicking this button here. Or you can right click, I think, and it'll be like an editable or make editable, or you can right click up here and make editable or push C, the hotkey. So now what we want to do is cut out our pieces. Go into edge mode, and what you want to do is to grab our knife tool. So what you can do is push M, K, and you can see that it'll bring up our line cut. Or you can right click and go drop down to line cut. And then what we want to do is to start to cut out our piece just by left clicking. You can sort of left click and drag to sort of dial it in onto that line. Here is kind of a sharp point. What we can do is click in the middle and then click on our point again. And just sort of work your way around the plant. Keep it sort of nice and close. It's just so it's easier to work on. Right there I sort of kind of messed it up. So you can undo and it'll just drop back to your last point, which is really nice. And there we go. So we have our first plant cut out. What you can do is push spacebar. That'll go back into your last tool. My last tool was the sort of selection cursor. And then what you can do is push spacebar again, and that'll go back into your line cut tool, so you can just quickly confirm your selection and then go back into your line cut tool so you can go and cut the next piece. So then you're just working your way around. This leaf is pretty low, so I'm not too worried about just cutting that little bit off, because we'll never see like this sort of bottom foliage as we got our grass and our other pieces sort of hiding it. Oops. Spacebar to go back to my tool, and then to sort of work your way around your plant again. You'll see that I accidentally made end gun here. We can easily fix that later. Oops, sorry about that. And sort of continue on our plant. Oops. Okay, I need to turn off soft selection. One sec, sorry about that. That's very bright. There we go. Okay. MK to grab my line cut tool, and then we just create a quad. It's okay if there's triangles and stuff. It doesn't really affect it too much because we won't be smoothing our geometry, because the reason why we're making atlases out of plants is to have a decently low geometry. But it's nice to have enough geometry so we can sort of like twist and sort of bend our piece so it's not just super flat when we go on to, if you happen to look at it from this kind of angle. So to sort of cut out all the pieces, and then when you cut all your pieces, you'll end up with something like this. So I sort of went ahead and cut out everything just to save some time for this tutorial. And you'll see sort of how I cut around all the pieces, like so. So our next step will be to cut out all these pieces using the split function, and then we'll line them up into a nice row to be able to prep them for the MoGraph cloner. So to do this, we'll go into our face selection, and with the sort of drag select tool, just sort of select all your pieces that are being cut out, right click and split. And then what happens is it creates a new object where it's split out of this piece. What happens is it actually keeps your selection for this. So once I split it out, I'll usually delete it, and then you can tell if you have actually split this piece out. which is nice because sometimes I'll be cutting them all out and then I think I have them all and I end up missing like maybe this guy, or sometimes I'll miss a random piece here and there. And when I just delete my old selection, it's easier to tell what I have split out already. So right here you can see how I have this piece here. We don't necessarily need that, so you just leave that out. You don't really have to add the pieces even though you sort of cut them out. You just leave the unnecessary pieces behind. I could probably leave this piece behind too. Then split it out and then delete it. And then I'll do this as well. Grab those pieces. We could leave that little triangle behind, this guy. Grab that guy. And then we'll split that out and delete the old piece. So what we want to do with these pieces, I'll just do it for these three to save time, and then I'll go ahead and cut out all the other pieces. What we want to do is sort of push them to the side, and then we'll rotate them all 90 degrees so they're standing up. Sort of move into position. What I usually like to do is sort of line up all the plants from smallest to biggest. And then once you get all your plants lined up, you can really have like a good idea of what your plant pieces will look like. So our next step will be to centering the axis for all these pieces. So select all your pieces and we'll go up into Mesh, Axis Center, and Center Axis 2. And this will move all our axis points into the center of each piece. And go into the Enable Axis option. And what we want to do is move all our pivot points down to the base of the plant, so when we clone these pieces, all our rotation and scale values will come from this point. So with a move pivot enabled, just sort of line up all these points. Once I sort of get a general movement, I'll do them select them each one at a time and then move those pieces, because some of them will need a little bit more dialing in than others. So once you get all those pieces, once you get all your pieces axis lined up, you'll notice that when you go from world to local, that it's actually turned 90 degrees, our axis point. And what we want is to make sure that the local has the Y going upwards. So with the move pivot still selected, select all your pieces and go into rotate mode, and we'll rotate it 90 degrees. So when you cycle back through our local and world translation, or whatever it's called, nothing changes, and that's what we want. We want to be able to cycle through back and forth and have no changes. This means that our center of our axis points are in the correct orientation. Okay, so I've went ahead and did that to all my pieces, and you can see that my center pivot point is lined up to each stem, and all the green axis, the Y axis, is going vertical. So our next step, what we want to do is to sort of twist and rotate these pieces and sort of add thickness to them using we'll add some topology for that, so that when we look at them from the side, we don't get like absolutely nothing. What we want is a nice plant to look at from 360 degrees. So to do this, select a plant. What we'll do is go into our vertex mode, our points mode, and for this I like to use rectangle selection just to sort of select the pieces. For this one, you'll see that this line, this sort of edge flow, doesn't sort of line up with this piece. So what we can do is add some topology in there to sort of give ourselves sort of a pivot point to sort of V-shape this piece to give it a little bit more natural look to it. So what we want to do is to go into loop path cut, and you'll see how we can sort of create edge loops where we want them now. Well, you could just sort of generally do it in an area, and it should be good enough for what we want out of it. Then if it sort of stops, you can use that line cut tool again and sort of guide our line down to the bottom to a finishing point. So now that we have that, what I like to do before I sort of rotate anything is we could select these points on the one side of our line. Oops. Make sure you turn your pivot point off, or else you won't be able to rotate anything. Is to rotate this and then line it back up. Grab this guy, we'll sort of bend it. Grab these, we'll bend it a little bit more. Grab all that, we'll bend that a little bit more. And you can see now we're already starting to get more of a 3D look to our atlas. Grab these guys, we'll remove those. Grab this guy, we'll do a nice little curl on that. And then same to the other side. Let's grab everything again. There we go. I'm going to rotate those. Sometimes when you have short points, it sort of like skews it out a little bit, but we can go back and adjust that piece singly. It's just easier to do a bigger movement rather than 50 small movements. Oops, sorry. So let's just move that guy into place. Grab these pieces. Delete that guy, or not, just remove that guy from the selection. We'll rotate that around there. Rotate that around there. And actually, let's grab these center pieces. And what we'll do is we'll bring them out, and then remove the top and bottom one, and then bring it out. Remove the top and bottom again, and then bring it a little bit more. There we go. Now we're already starting to get like a somewhat of a 3D looking plant. Sort of rotate that into a position just a bit more. There we go. Awesome. So now our next step that we have, now that we have sort of our V shape or our U shape to our plant, grab your rectangle selection tool, select the top points, turn on soft selection. If this properties panel is invisible, like sometimes it'll be in like a different tool or whatever, that'll be dropped down there, just click the selection tool again and it'll bring it back up for you. Oh, there we go. So now that it's on, you'll see that we have a fall off for our pieces. The yellow will be like it's moving 100%. You can see that it has like the full rotation, and then it has a fall off going back down to the gray where it's not rotating at all. So now that we have a nice fall off, you'll see that the bottom's moving a little bit. Generally, I like to keep the bottom not changed, so then I don't have to go back and adjust that pivot point. So what we can do is just shrink our radius a little bit. There we go. So what I like to do is give it a nice twist, and then we could do stuff like move it and then rotate it that same sort of direction, so we have a nice sort of like natural gravitational sort of like weight to it. Just sort of adjust it here and there. There we go. So now you can see, let's go back into object mode. Now you can see that we're getting nice shape to our little atlas piece. So let's do this next piece. Go back into points mode, and let's create another line down the middle again. I think that's fine right there. We have a point here that we can sort of adjust. But if you really want to adjust it, we can, let's go like that, and let's go like that. There we go. And then to delete these pieces, these edges, to select those, right click, and dissolve. Or actually that messes up the UVs. We'll just leave them there. It's not going to cause any harm. Let's grab these, turn off your soft selection. What I usually like to do is just go through everything and then sort of give it that V shape, and then go through everything again and twist and turn and rotate it, just so you're not going back and forth between your tools. Sort of rotate out into position. Oops. Grab this point, we'll move that. Let's grab all those points. We'll move those. Some plants you won't be able to do this. Some you'll be able to do it quite a bit. It all depends on the shape and piece you have. There we go. So I think that'll be fine for this piece. Let's just bring this piece around there. Awesome. Actually, I wanted this guy more around too. There we go. So let's grab our top points. We'll enable soft selection again. And this time let's rotate it the other way. Just so not everything's like rotated and skewed the same way. When you give pieces different rotations, it'll just give it a more natural vibe to it, more natural look. I think that one might be a little bit too much. I might just give it a soft little guy, soft little bend. There we go. Sweet. So let's go into object mode. And you can see how we're starting to get some nice shapes where no matter what angle you're looking at it, you still get a lot of the plant to look at. Okay, so I went ahead and I did that variation technique to all the pieces, and now you can see that from every angle you sort of get a nice full sort of plant piece, and there's not really a sort of angle where you're getting a super paper thin flat piece. And if while you're doing this, if you want to like check and sort of see if this is actually how you want and how the plant will look, what we could do is go into our plant shader, go into the color tab, copy shader, then we'll go into our alpha, enable alpha, and then we will paste our shader. And you can see now that everything's sort of getting cut out. If you want to check this with the color, what we can do is drag our albedo into the color. Just say no or yes, whichever you prefer. And you can see now that we're getting basically how exactly our plant will look when it's rendered, apart from like proper lighting and translucency and everything. But with that, you can see how our plants have a nice sort of three-dimensional feel to them. Like even this one, you sort of feel like you have a stem and then like leaves popping off the stem. And then once we build cloner plants with these pieces, our bush will have a nice full 3D feel to it.